What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I'm going to continue my conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. As we look at George Byers, born June 25th, 1872 in Charlottetown, Canada. He would die April 10th, 1937 in Boston, Massachusetts. He stood 5'8.5" weighed 150 to 165 pounds. We will be looking at black fighters who fought in the bare knuckle era to continue with this conversation that is so important to understand. The contributions of black fighters were just as major as the establishment itself. Frank Childs, he was known as the Crafty Texan. He was born July 17th, 1867 in Texas, and he stood 5'9.5", weighed 160 to 185 pounds. He was a major force in boxing history. This man was a colored champion, and we'll be talking about him because his contributions were very important to the lineage of boxing. We've spoken about Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, born April 1st, 1868 in Columbus, Georgia. He died January 1943 in Chelsea, London, England. Stood 5'10", weighed 160 pounds. He was a major force. We talked about him several times, not only in this series, but on my platform. But I want you to identify yourself with Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler. Very important fighter. He fought England's Dan Creedon, 2 separate occasions, came very close to winning a title overseas, and that would have been before George Dixon. Very important to remember these things. Now, Bobby Dobbs, he was a colored lightweight champion. He was in the ring with Joe Gans, who would be the first athlete of America, the first black lightweight champion of America, the black lightweight champion of America. And Bobby Dobbs was born January 1868 in Cartersville, Georgia. He would die December 25th, 1930 in Charleston, South Carolina. He stood 5'8.5", weighed 125 to 136 pounds, and he was a major force in boxing for its contribution. Very important to mention Robert Bobby Dobbs. Lowdown, Bob Stonewall Allen, born in Atlanta, Georgia, December 10th, 1866. He stood 5'7", weighed 120 to 140 pounds. What's remarkable about a fighter that I will be mentioning, who also stood 5'6¾ to 5'7", was Sam Langford, the Boston Bone Crusher. But Langford would become a featherweight, and he would have more knockouts in heavyweight than Jack Johnson and many other great black fighters. So Bob Allen, Stonewall, very good fighter in his day. He fought bare knuckle. He knows what it's like to be in a ring under those conditions. And he must be spoken about, not left out of this conversation. George Godfrey, Old Chocolate, born March 30th, 1853 in Prince Edward Island in Canada. He would die October 17th, 1901 in Massachusetts. He stood 5'10.5", weighed 165 to 176 pounds. Old Chocolate was very fast with his head movement, foot and hands. He became the world colored heavyweight champion when he defeated Professor Charles Hadley, Boston, Massachusetts, on the evening of February 22nd, 1883. Via 6-round technical knockout. The bout was refereed by American bare knuckle heavyweight champion John O'Sullivan. Now, after the bout, John O'Sullivan was approached by the Old Chocolate, George Godfrey, challenged him to a match. John O'Sullivan and George Godfrey were supposed to be fighting. They were scheduled to battle in a fight to the finish. The contest was scheduled September 1881. John O'Sullivan would decide not to face George Godfrey. It would be a historic contest, the first time a black fighter and a white fighter would face one another. You would have two champions. That would have been historic. John O'Sullivan decided to draw the color line. That draws questions to me. George Godfrey didn't get his fair shot as he should have. The first American bare knuckle heavyweight champion contest between a black and white fighter. Oh, that is as historic as can get. George Godfrey would face other black fighters, such as McHenry Johnson, Minneapolis, Denver Ed Martin, Professor C.A.C. Smith, Professor Charles Hadley, Black Prince Peter Jackson, George Taylor, Billy Wilson, the Black Demon, Joe Butler, Ed Bendy, but no world championship title shot for the old chocolate, George Godfrey. After John O'Sullivan refused George Godfrey's challenge, the refusal came on May 14th, 1888. The Black Prince would challenge the old chocolate to a contest in San Francisco, California. George Godfrey would be stopped in 19 rounds, and he would lose the colored heavyweight championship title to the Black Prince, who was an Australian and England's champion. What a moment. Now, I just want to mention this fella here. His name is Phoebe Smith Williams. He was known as George Godfrey Leaperville Shadow. Why it's important to mention this gentleman? Because Harry Wells was known as the Brown Panther, who would defend his colored heavyweight championship title 25 times. Would lose his title through default in a match with Jack Sharkey, the Boston Gob, 1926. His color championship title had nothing to do with the match with Jack Sharkey. But unfortunately, his title would be stripped in that contest because the referee had called Harry Wells out for low blows and concessive holding in the Jack Sharkey bout. So once that title was vacant, George Godfrey, who was the Leaperville Shadow, would take on Larry Gans of Canada. He would defeat him and he would now become the colored heavyweight champion. He would take on O.B. Walker. He would take on Al Walker. Very good fighter was George Godfrey, the Leaperville Shadow. Now, we did mention Jonathan Banks, the Darky Wizard. 1878, 1885. Born December 25th, 1860. Richmond, Virginia. He was a lightweight. Walked in the ring in his professional bout, weighing 140 pounds. Now, who says I cannot add Sam Langford to this bare knuckle discussion? I can because this is my conversation. Sam Langford was known as the Boston Bone Crusher. Stood 5'6.5" weighed 126 to 170 pounds. Had 22 contests with Harry Wells, 14 contests with Joe Jeanette between December 25th, 1905 and September 14th, 1917. He had 6 wins, 5 draws, 3 losses. They would fight in Massachusetts the majority of times. Be in the ring with Jack Johnson April 26, 1906 for the colored heavyweight championship title. He would face Jack Blackburn 6 times between December 23rd, 1903 and October 7th, 1905. 4 draws, 1 win, and 1 no contest. 15 bouts with Sam McVeigh. He won the colored and the Australian heavyweight championship title between April 1st, 1911 And August 14th, 1920, he would exchange hands with Sam McVeigh, the Oxnard Cyclone. Be in the ring battling Jim Johnson 15 times. 11 wins, 1 draw. May 14th, 1910 to August 22nd, 1918. He would face Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, 11 times. Jack Thompson, Fred Fulton, Brad Simmons, Jim Barry 12 times, George Godfrey, James Tut Jackson, Clem Johnson, Ed Bearcat Wright, Jim Flynn, Fireman 4 times, Joe Gans, Joe Walcott, Dave Holly. He would fight Black Fitzsimmons, who they called Kid Monday, young Peter Jackson 6 times. He would win the Color Middleweight Championship title that was vacant from young Peter Jackson. Sam Langford is my number 1 greatest fighter of all times. One of the most devastating heavyweight hitters in boxing history. He was a 5-time colored heavyweight champion, 1-time colored middleweight champion, 1-time Australian heavyweight champion, 1-time European heavyweight champion. He was a great fighter. Shout out to Sam Langford. Sam Langford, Mexican heavyweight champion, Australian heavyweight champion, 5-time colored heavyweight champion. He was a European middleweight and colored middleweight champion. Just want to be clear. This fighter was the quintessential fisticuff master. Fought in the pocket, walked you down, stand there and bang with you. He can cut the ring off. Threw both hands at all times. Had a master jab, right hand lead, stab to the pit of the stomach. All these were done by Sam Langford between 1902 and 1926. He had other very good black fighters, such as the Quaker City Terror. This man invented the bolo punch. Larry Temple. Now we know about Joe Gans and the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott. Joplin Ghost Jeff Clark. We ran through some other names that were very important. I just want you to understand the importance of conversation with a black fighter is just as important as a conversation about boxing in general. Harry Wells. He was a remarkable fighter. 34 colored championship bouts, 25 title defenses in the colored division. He matches with George Dixon with 25 defenses of his featherweight championship title. And the Brown Bomber Joe Louis with 25 defenses of his heavyweight championship title. All 3 of these men, black fighters. Bill Tate, Kid Norfolk, Homer Smith, Jeff Clark, Joe Jeanette, Harry Wells, Sam Langford, George Godfrey, Tut Jackson, Clem Johnson, Ed Bearcat Wright, Dave Holly, Jack Blackburn. You had so many great fighters. Charles C. Smith, Morris Grant, Charles Hadley, who was a professor, Peter Jackson, the Black Prince, Bob Armstrong, the Battle Royale. He was the king of it. Frank Childs, the crafty Texan, George Byers, Denver Ed Martin, Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant, Sam McVeigh, the Oxnard Cyclone, Harry Wills, known as the Brown Panther, Big Bill Tate, Larry Gans, O.B. Walker, talk about names within the colored championship division. You had Lee Anderson and Kit Norfolk between May 30th, 1921, May 8th, 1923. In the colored middleweight division, you had fighters such as Harris Smith, Ed Bentley, Joe Butler, Frank Craig, George Byers, Sam Langford, Eddie Palmer, Jamaica Kid, Panama Joe Gans, Larry Estridge, Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. He was not recognized as the colored champion until just recently. I learned about Harry Smith 35 years ago. Harry Smith was the Harlem Thunderbolt. My grandfather knew Harry Smith. He lived in Harlem. He was originally from Jamaica. He would win that title in 1929 at the Athletic Club. That building is torn down now. My grandfather showed me exactly where that building was. And he would become the colored middleweight champion. Unfortunately, he was just recognized just a few years ago. Amazing. Charlie Burley, Holman Williams, Coco Kid, just to name a few. You had a Negro champion. His name was Jonathan Banks and James Diversey. That's a funny story, and we'll talk about that some other time. But when you look at black fighters and you look at what they have gone through, you had the colored lightweight division with Bobby Dobbs and Harry Cook, Leo Johnson, many others. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Eddie Palmer, Gorilla Jones, the Fighting Gorilla, Coco Kid, Charlie Burley. They were all colored welterweight champions. The thing about Coco Kid, he would be the first colored welterweight champion after the Gorilla, Fighting Gorilla Jones. And he would be the last colored middleweight champion, 1943, when he would defeat Holman Williams. What a milestone. Boxing's rich history. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights, all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. As we continue with these conversations, you would have some men that would set the bar. George Dixon, Joe Gans, Jack Johnson, the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, Dixie Kid, John Henry Lewis, Joe Louis. You got William Gorilla Jones, Theodore Tiger Flowers, Georgie Pace, great bantamweight champion. Boxing is a historical conversation. It was a pleasure speaking it with you. See you in the next video. Be well. Peace.